Hi everyone, and welcome to the recording of Saviom's webinar, Stay Agile as You Expand, a specific webinar for growing Agile teams. Now, in today's webinar, we'll be talking about some different components of the challenges of scaling with Agile, scaling your resources, your teams, how to kind of adapt to the Agile environment that your company's kind of grown used to. And then the big bulk of today's presentation is going to be kind of talking about the best practices of expanding an Agile team without really it affecting productivity levels, efficiency and output levels as well for your different projects that are there. And, some tips and actionable steps you can take towards implementing these as well. And finally, since we are a resource management focused centric company, I'm going to go into and observe how resource management can really act as a solution for you, and using the right resource allocation and scheduling methods can really kind of resolve a lot of these expansion issues that a lot of organizations face. Now, a quick first overview of Agile. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of this. This is pretty much Agile 101, but the one point that I have over here that I really wanted to focus on is the key features of Agile having a transparent work culture. Now, one of the key ways for Agile to really thrive is when there's open communication and a free flow of information between all the people that are involved with the relevant projects. Now, this is going to be a bit of a core point that we're going to be focusing on in this webinar, and how it's kind of, in a lot of ways, a double-edged sword. The benefits you can get from Agile is because of transparency, but that can also really hinder when you are onboarding new people onto your different Agile teams that are there. So we're going to really kind of spend a fair, a good amount of time on that. Now, the first component that we're going to go into are challenges that growing teams face. Now, the first one, and this is a fairly straightforward one, is conflicting structures can cause productivity slumps. Now, so Agile teams obviously advocate small cross-functional teams, but most organizational structures, whether you're more of a medium, large size organization, will have structures that are built on larger teams. Now, before you can really learn to strike a balance between these two of Agile's push for a more smaller dynamic type of structure to the original traditional structure that you have, you automatically do see a clash, which really results in a lack of productivity. And it's kind of really important to kind of take a note of that. Now, the second one on that is autonomous teams find it difficult to stay organized. Now, teams obviously don't come naturally equipped to handle autonomy. Agile really pushes for there to be a bit more, equality and not that kind of traditional hierarchical structure that's there with most project teams. Now, and they're likely to face hardships as well as mismanage times before they start working effectively. And this takes time to really adjust to that component. And especially when you are hiring more people, this does become more and more complicated, and kind of building them and making sure that they're on the same page as the process and methodology that you're kind of pushing for. It does take a fair bit of time. And again, that does result in a lack of output and productivity, as you're going to see with a lot of these challenges that we're going to go through. Now, the third one is kind of skill levels and experience levels can clash as well. So, new Agile teams often really face adjustment issues when people with different skill sets and experience levels end up together when it comes to Agile regrouping. And things like ego clashes, designation concerns, career insecurities, all these byproducts of some of these clashes kind of seep out and bubble up into the work culture, which can be quite toxic if it's not really kind of handled with the right context and the right tools. And if it's not addressed, you need to kind of make sure that you have the infrastructure or the processes set up that these type of issues don't come about. And so this now brings me to my next point on transparency. And now, transparency, as I mentioned, is a double-edged sword. So it's Agile is all about healthy transparency among teams, and that's firstly very important. Having that free flow of information and being able to see everyone's different resources in each project is very important, but there are negatives to that as well, and it can often easily border intrusion when it's not really introduced with context. And often new Agile teams find themselves intimidated at the prospect of such transparency, especially when you are kind of initially implementing it. And finally, we come to our last point, and this is quite related to the autonomous teams. Loosely defined leadership takes time to mature. Definitely. So like leadership that Agile prescribes is usually evolved, and you must have heard is drawn from the first amongst equals principle. And rather than really imposing power, it encourages leaders to lead from behind. And on paper and conceptually, that is a really strong component of Agile. And if implemented properly in a practical environment, it is very powerful in terms of getting a lot of different projects done, and also kind of improving productivity and improving ownership amongst people that are within the projects. But once again, if it's not introduced with context, and especially when you are a growing organization, this can get very messy. And as leaders begin to explore this, they're often likely to cause delays before they get teams to work at a pace that is really effective enough. So these are all points, kind of a mix of when you are kind of introducing Agile to your organization, and at the same time also when you are expanding as an organization. It's important to kind of keep all these points in mind. Now, everything now after this, what we're going to be talking about is just kind of methods and how to kind of overcome this. And we will be talking about this in a more resource management context. As for staying, to stay agile as you expand, there are a lot of other components that can kind of help this, especially in the traditional project management realm of things. We are going to take a more resource management centric approach to this. So all the points that are there are going to kind of be revolving around that. Now, the first thing that we will be talking about is learning to firstly, and so one of the best practices is firstly to learn to work collaboratively. And now, I know that sounds like a major motherhood statement. Working collaboratively resolves all issues, blah, 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 teamwork and everything. But what I really mean by that is that, and this is a quote I really like, that people in interactions need to be there over processes and tools. At the end of the day, things like Agile, waterfall, any different type of project management methodology is only that. It's a methodology, it's a structure, a framework that you work around. But at the end of the day, in terms of the more important and practical elements of interaction and then making sure that communication is strong should be at the forefront of all your strategy and approaches. So coming from it must be really integrated within the fiber of your organization, and this honestly takes time to perfect, and unconditional visibility firstly makes it effortless to implement. Now, without really going into how to change your work culture, that's not the point of this, but some of the more practical things you can do is make sure visibility is a key thing, where you can kind of see all the different type of interactions that are happening with everyone. And that again leads me to the next point of transparency. Transparency, it's important to build a transparent work culture, and I'll talk about that in the context of not making sure that it doesn't get to that intrusion point of view. But what I mean by that is that transparency has no substitute, and your Agile culture will definitely suffer if that's not really there. But remember, transparency and intrusion are very different from each other. It's important to kind of know the difference between the two. So, for example, organizational visibility of all resources and their project timelines gives you a non-intrusive outline of the whole process. So what I really mean by that is that transparency needs to kind of have a certain limit to it. You want to make sure that only the information that's relevant for the project is there. Intrusion and a lot of these other kind of issues that can come about between different teams usually ends up that there's a lot of irrelevant information that passes across from different work schedules or different elements that kind of border along this line of kind of micromanagement. So you want to make sure that only the key information like project timelines or the resource skills or information that's there is kind of visible. You don't want every single component to be available for everyone to view. So irrelevant opinions and irrelevant kind of micromanaging techniques kind of then get a chance to come through. So you want to make sure that's kind of all limited and only the relevant information can pass across. Now, The third one, and this is one that I feel like doesn't get a lot of a lot of people don't really focus on this, is how you measure success. Measuring success is very critical in terms of how your teams kind of grow, and especially if you need to grow teams, or if you need to kind of contract the team size or so on. It's important of how you're kind of measuring that. Now, things like when you're measuring projects, on-time delivery, product quality are two key components to that. Obviously, those are the classic ones. But then, resource utilization, how much they're being utilized, and then the fourth one, of measuring your capacity against demand are two components that don't get as much kind of importance as they need to. So by optimal resource utilization, one component is seeing how well, and simply is how well are your resources being utilized. Are they working the right amount of hours? Are they being overloaded with work? Do you need to expand and bring more people into the team accordingly? Those type of things are a lot more core. They don't kind of measure quality. They don't really measure delivery as much, but it kind of measures your resources, productivity and output a lot better. Seeing how much time they're spending on a specific job then really allows you to kind of plan a lot better for the future as well. How you're allocating the work, how many people you need on specific teams. And then that again then brings me to the capacity against product demand. Capacity being your staff. How many people do you need in the medium to long term? Those type of measurements are very critical when you are planning for future projects that are there. And especially when you are expanding, you want to make sure that you're hiring the right people with the right skills, or onboarding the right people with the right skills. So, and to ensure that you have the people that you require for your projects. Now, the next one is investing in skill-based allocation. Now, Agile is all about designing solutions that add value to the lives of your clients. So adding value addition requires skill-based allocation of resources as opposed to mindless continuity. One kind of trap that a lot of companies get into is just to kind of reuse the existing staff that they're comfortable with for these jobs. So, and one of the key beauties of hiring new people is that you have a fresh workforce with fresh skills and ideas and perspectives towards a lot of these projects. So if you have, if you're investing in kind of more skill-based allocation, you ensure that you have the right people that you're kind of onboarding and expanding with. So, and especially when you can filter with your skill inventory based on the specialized skills, experience, and qualifications, it becomes a lot easier to achieve. So by skills, experience and qualifications are key components. Skills can be internal. Obviously, they're going to be more internal related measurements about what each company finds important, but it's important to kind of really measure on that based on past projects they've worked on. And the final one, and this is is about making future-proof decisions. Agile at the end of the day is a long-term solution that proves worthy for an organization's growing pain. But to scale at a speed that is viable and effective enough for you is one of the key components. And to know that pace, you require insights that are technically, they need to be scientific. They can't be guesses or just estimates. That's really not enough. They need to be some key measurements and measurables that you're kind of going for to figure out the type of people that you're going to be bringing on board. And those decisions need to scale with futuristic reports that map your vital parameters. Now, each organization has a different pace. So whether you're a tech-based startup or you're more in the medium, you're a few years into the organization and it's already a 50 to 100 person sized organization, it's important that you are measuring those people, those skills that you want to be hiring on board. So those reports, you need to have some pretty key reports for that. And that's one thing that we're going to then go on to over here. So, as I was mentioning before, everything that I've been talking about is kind of in that resource management framework. And, and to kind of quickly touch upon this, the 4 components of resource management, or the 4 pillars of resource management: visibility, allocation, utilization, and forecasting, are key components to really help you expand your Agile team. So by visibility, making sure you have a bird's eye view of all your resources and what work they're placed onto. By allocation, making sure you have the right resource for the right job. Utilization, you're optimizing the right people for the specific job that's up and coming. And you want to make sure people aren't overloaded or underloaded with work. And finally, forecasting. You want to measure and make sure your demand meets future, your future supply of your resources match the future demand of the work that's coming up. You want to have both of them equalize and equal each other, so you don't have too many people for the amount of work that you have, or too much work for the number of resources that you hold. Now, when I talk about that is something that Saviom resource management software provides. We are a resource management centric software. If you can see, the first thing that I say with visibility, you can see that all your staff and what work they're allocated onto over here is there. The second one of allocation, finding the right resource based on the skills. You want to make sure that you have the right skills. You're not kind of reusing the same stuff for each new project that's coming up. You want to make sure that you can kind of base it on the skills, or other relevant criteria like employment type, job title, and so on. Now, the third component of utilization, you can see over here with the utilization report that we have. It can show you how your resources can be optimized, how well they're being utilized, whether they're underutilized, overutilized, or so on. And the final one, you need to track your capacity against your demand. How much work do you have in comparison to the people in your organization? Do you need to hire more people? Do you need to retrain them more? And what's the availability between them? So, if you have a capacity of 14 people and demand of about 9.95, obviously you have availability. 4 of them are available for that time. Or do you have negative availability, where you need to hire more people or train more people based on that job? So without making this a product demo, you can kind of see some of the clients that have kind of really taken advantage of this, and especially for a lot of IT and professional services firms that do use the Agile methodology. For them, expanding and having that visibility and having those scientific resources to make better decisions really helps them adapt with that Agile framework. Now, I'm going to just be finishing off over here. So if you have any further questions, you can directly email us on saviom.com, on info.au@saviom.com, or on our website at saviom.com, where you can go on our contact us page and communicate with us directly from there. And for now, thank you so much for watching our webinar. If there are any further questions, please get in touch. Thank you.